Hello everyone. This is additional class for preparing your midterm exam, and I'm going to make a summary of our lecture given during the earliest part of this term. So the first week toward the 6th week, approximately. These are the scope of your midterm exam area. So here I prepare lecture handout, and I'm going to explain things through the handout, so you can watching through. The first thing we talked about was the language. So understanding Indian culture and Indian Buddhism, understanding Indian language is very important, mainly because the study of a language determine the fate of Indian people and their movement from in Central Asia to the India. So in India, many people think of Indian people living in India for long time, and they develop their own language, Sanskrit, there in India. So Hindu nationalist party firmly believe that India is their own country, together with the people speaking Sanskrit. But when we study language, Indian language, the oldest one, Sanskrit, we found out that Sanskrit is the part of the language not belongs to India entirely, but belongs to a pan-European and the Asian language. We call this as an Indo-European language family. So within the Indo-European language family, Sanskrit become part of Indo-Iranian, and the Indo-Iranian become part of Indo-Greek language, and which also belongs to the whole very big Indo-European languages. So that kind of a finding was done by a Welsh judge called William Jones in 1790s, and he compared Sanskrit, oldest Indian language, with the Latin and Greek and Avestan, and he found out that there are similarities, similarity in the root of verb, similarity in many grammatical forms. So he concluded that everything comes from the common source. So the common source, we call it as a Proto-Indo-European. People who speak the Proto-Indo-European, we call them Arya. So Aryan people, the word Arya basically means a noble person, a socialized person, and so on, become a identity mark for the ethnic group called group of people speaking Proto-Indo-European. So many people thought they might be originated from Caucasus area between Black Sea and Caspian Sea. We are not so sure. So some of them go to Europe. Some of them go to through the Balkan to the Europe, and some of them go to Iran and India, and the other ones through the steppe toward the European countries. So when we look at Indian language, Sanskrit is the oldest one. We usually call it Vedic Sanskrit and classical Sanskrit. Vedic Sanskrit has got many similarity with Persian languages. The old Persian language was called Avestan, because one of the principal texts of Zoroastrian religion was written in the book called Avesta. So Avestan means the language of Avesta, and the Vedic Sanskrit has got many similarity with Avestan. So that's the Vedic Sanskrit. Maybe before or sometime they enter into the India, they developed it. So the text using Vedic Sanskrit, we usually said Rig Veda, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. And within the India, around 4th century, a brilliant grammarian called Panini established a Sanskrit grammar, Sanskrit phonology, and Sanskrit style and everything. So starting from Panini, we call this second part of Sanskrit language called classical Sanskrit. And the classical Sanskrit usually follow the rule written in Ashtadhyayi, the grammar book written by Panini. And the text following this classical Sanskrit usually are epics. So Mahabharata, or Mahabharata or Ramayana, that kind of epic follow or classical Sanskrit. So Buddhist text, Abhidharma Kosha Bhasha, or life story of the Buddha, Buddha Charita, all follow classical Sanskrit, we have to say. But when Indian people entering into the India, the Sanskrit speaking people, they start to use Indian language, the language mixed together and become simplified. The oldest one was called Pali. Then this middle Indic was usually called Prakrit. So among the Prakrit, oldest one was Pali. And we also have Maharashtri or Magadhi or Apavamsha and so on. Here, one thing you should remember was that this Pali is the language of Buddhism, and the Pali you can find it from the Buddhist canon appeared in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. So one of the oldest language I have to say was Pali, and the Buddha. As a historical person, when he preached Buddhism in northeastern part of the India, he doesn't want to use Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is kind of a language exclusively belongs to a Brahmin class or priest class. So he prefer using a Middle Indic or Prakrit, because Prakritic is mother tongue, everyone speaks. So that everyone can understand. Everyone can understand the teaching given by the Buddha. So that's the big difference between Buddhism and Sanskrit, Buddhism and Hindu. And then we have a contemporary Indo-Aryan, Hindi. Hindi is Middle Indic used in the northern part of India, mixed with the Persian languages, or we have Bengali, Punjabi, and so on, around approximately 230 different languages. But the difference are not so big and great, I have to say. So these are the languages. So in terms of Buddhism, Sanskrit is oldest language, but Buddhism originally used Pali. So any Buddhist text written in Prakrit or Pali or Middle Indic is usually first one. And then Sanskrit become a language of administration, a language of a priest class. So Buddhist step by step translate or changing their text from Middle Indic to Sanskrit to make it available to people around the India. So that's the big changes. Usually occur around first century AD to 3rd century AD. So step by step, Buddhist text, starting to appear in Sanskrit. But Buddhist Sanskrit are not good. So their Sanskrit are not perfect in everything. We usually call it Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. So Buddhism try to use Sanskrit, but their Sanskrit are not perfect. So that's a Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. Many Mahayana Buddhist text and the early text of life story of the Buddha use that Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. And also we have a script. The oldest script should be Kharoshuti, used in northwestern part of the India. It's very similar to Persian languages because their writing start not from left to right, it's from right to left. Exactly the same with the script reading in Mesopotamia area. So That's the Kharoshuti, usually used by Dharma Guptaka or later Sarvastivada when they moved into Gandhara area. So that's the oldest one. And then second oldest one, we call it Brahmi. And Brahmi is a script used by Mauryan Empire. So many Ashokan inscription, when we checked it, are written in Brahmi script. And then during the time when Buddhism traveled from India to China, Gupta period, 보통 maybe I can say 2nd century to 5th or 6th century AD, their script was called the Shittam. So Shittam appear not only in India or northwestern India, also we can see some of them in China, and we can also see some of the pagoda in Korea as well. And then we have a Devanagari, contemporary Indian script, and Sinhalese, that's a Indian script, we have to say. These are the difference. So Sanskrit, polished or well-formed or complete and purified language, while Prakrit, language of common people, original or mother tongue. So that's the difference between the two. And what kind of language the Buddha used? We have to say Magadhi. It's Eastern Prakrit, but Pali, I have to say, is Western Prakrit, usually used in Ujjain or Sanchi area. So maybe Buddhism transmitted from the northern part of India to Sri Lanka. The monk memorized teaching of the Buddha not in Magadha area, but in central part of India. They are actually go there. That is why Pali language follow Middle Indic is a Western Prakrit style. And the Pali, one of the most important language in India, is a form of Prakrit. And post writing down in zero in between 50 years in Sri Lanka during the region of Batangamani Abhaya, and then it become fixed, and then it become the language of Theravada Buddhism, which was the same as a Southern Buddhism, we can say. And the oldest Buddhist text survived is a Gandhari script from northwestern India. So these are the things you should remember in this first handout. I'm moving to the second handout you have. Second handout, I was talking about Samsara and Karma. Samsara and Karma. And here you should remember that when Sanskrit speaking people entering into the India, they developed their own text. The text was called the Brahmanical literature, consists of 4 different sections. First section was called the Veda, second section Brahmana, third section Aranyaka, and fourth section Upanishad. And these are the books approximately when they enter, they step by step develop. So Veda 1000 before Common Era, Brahmana 800 before Common Era, Aranyaka and Upanishad 6 to 400 before Common Era. And Aranyaka and Upanishad almost the same period as Buddhism developed. So the origin of the idea of karma and samsara, we could think of those people, Sanskrit-speaking people entering into the India, or indigenous Indian people, or Indus Valley civilization. So if the Sanskrit-speaking people are responsible for the idea of rebirth and karma, it should be appeared in their literature. So when we actually checked it, nothing there in Vedic literature. They usually said immortality simply means living 100 years. But in Brahmana, they step by step talk about the other world. The other world where people die, they are going, they are starting to talk about that. And then they develop the idea that in this world, the people keep dying. So the other world, they might keep dying. So humanity or human beings are terrible or miserable creature because they keep dying again, again in this world and the next world. So this is a starting point of developing, getting the idea of rebirth. And then finally, when they talk about their life principle or philosophy in Aranyaka and Upanishad, they starting to talk about karma and rebirth, which actually suggests Aranyaka means a forest. There is no forest in Indus River Valley area. Forest can be appear in the middle part of Ganges River Valley area. I think they actually learn from this idea from the people living there in the middle part of Ganges River Valley area, and that people become the Kshatriya, and the Sanskrit speaking people become Brahmins. So, and then they develop, Indian social system called the caste system. Under them, they have Vaishya, merchant and farmers and so on, and also Sudra, the servant class and so on. These are the formation of Indian society. So there are two important Upanishad. One was called the Chandogya, and the other one was the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. In those Upanishads, you can get the idea of rebirth. Two kind of rebirth: accidental rebirth or inevitable rebirth. Accidental rebirth, I have to say, we have a nice story between the king and Brahmin Gautama and Swetaketu. And the important thing is that the idea of rebirth first handed over from Kshatriya class to Brahmin for the first time, in this story. And they said that when there is a sacrifice and there is a cremation, human being become a smoke, going into the moon through the space, and then they become a smoke, and the smoke become a cloud, and then they coming down as a rain, and men eat it and hand over to the female, and they reborn again. So that's the earliest idea of rebirth you can see in some of the early Upanishad. So this is not perfect, because if that person going down at the top of the Himalaya mountain or Sahara desert, there is no chance to be reborn again, because it is almost impossible to be part of the plant or rice or some kind of how can I say vegetables and so on. So that's not perfect. And then we have a more better one called the inevitable rebirth. We can see in the story of Janaka, the king, Yajnavalkya, one of the best Brahmin, together with Arthabhaga. And here Arthabhaga asks about rebirth to the Yajnavalkya, and Yajnavalkya said, "My friend, we cannot talk about this in public. Take my hand, Arthabhaga. Let's go and discuss in public." So Yajnavalkya didn't want to talk this subject openly, mainly because this is a new idea. People reluctant to talk about it in public. So when they go to the private area, Yajnavalkya said, "Punyo by punyena karmana bhavati papaha papena." A man turns into good by good action, turns into bad by bad action. So this is one of the first sentence where karma was used. So here karma as a driving force for rebirth. People keep reborn again and again and again. And at this point, Indic text talk about Atman, soul or self. So soul or self become the subject of rebirth. So keep reborn again and again. That sort of a process you can see there. So systematization of rebirth, you can see that inevitable rebirth story. So that actually suggests the idea initially comes from the local people, and then Brahmins accept it, and then they made systematization. In Indus Valley area, We can say quite possible, but the language or script not deciphered yet. But there are some similarities. Here you can see a person preparing or performing yoga, and here you can see people venerating tree and so on. You can see many modern Indian religion, but we are not sure because of the language. We are not sure. So just leave Indus Valley civilization as it is, because we don't know yet. But I think establishing karma and rebirth largely responsible for Sanskrit people living in low or middle part of Ganges Valley area. And in that area, we have 3 major religions up here. One was called Ajivika, and second one Jainism, and third one Buddhism. And when we checked it, Ajivika accepted Buddhism, but they never accept the idea of karma. And one of the very nice Ajivika poem survived in Buddhist literature. And here Ajivika said, "To heaven there is no gate. Just live down your fate. Joy and sorrow come to you all as a fate decree. The circle of rebirth at least make all men pure. Be not too keen to know whatever comes next." So endurance, kshanti, is the one of the best thing people can do, and everyone automatically become released from endless rebirth at the end of the world, or something like that. So as you can see here, Ajivika was prepared by kshatriya class, because once you accept the karma, killing or giving torture, using violence is prohibited. But here in Ajivika, they never accepted. Makali Kosala, the founder of Ajivika, has got good relationship with the Kshatriya class. So for the Kshatriya, they just endure their fate, and born as a warrior, they should fight. So it gives a good comfort, and even though they die, they will live on again and again. So that's the one of the earliest idea of rebirth appeared there. And then we have a Jainism. Jainism, one of the oldest religion, still survived in India. And in Jains, they believe we have got soul. Jain soul was called the jiva, and jiva is very lightweight, usually going up like a hot balloon. But karma, according to them, is a baudgalika, which means material, which has got a weight. So karma attached to the soul is going down. And according to Jains, the world look like this, and the human beings are living in the middle. If we remove the karma, our soul become lighter, then we can go up. If we continue to act, more karma attached, we are going down. So that's the Jain idea of rebirth and karma. So what we should do is, how can I say, tapas, asceticism. So burn out all our karmas through asceticism, and no more activity. Then we can go up to the top of the heaven. That was called the release or nirvana. Jains usually said. So the only way we can do voluntary starvation to death, I have to say. So that's too much. So Buddhism no longer accept the idea that karma is a material. So Buddhists said karma is intention. So one of the most important passage in early Buddhism, we can see Cettana ahambikabe kamman badami, Cetta itwa kamman karoti, kayena vachaya manasa. O monk, I declare intention as a karma, because having intended, a person perform action through body and language and the mind. So intention is more important. So once karma become intention, we can qualify karma ethically. So ethically, karma can be either good or bad. So when karma become qualified, good and bad, if we perform good, we have a happy result. If we perform a bad karma, we have unhappy or miserable result later. So with the Buddhism, this kind of exercisation become completed, and with this idea, the idea of rebirth and the world moving through the power of karma firmly established. So with this idea, Buddhism actually start to talk about the world we are living in, what we should do, living in every moment with a good intention. If you are living in a bad intention, you will have a miserable result. But if you live in a good intention in every moment, you will have a good result. So that's the Buddhist idea of dana, shila, swarga. If you give a gift to people who need it, poor people and so on. And if you have panchashila, not to kill, not terrorize, and so on, then you will be reborn in the heaven. So that's a simple Buddhist idea of karma established there. So these are the second handout when I talk about karma and rebirth. And the third handout, I was talking about establishment of life story of the Buddha. You may remember there are 5 stages to establish life story of the Buddha. Total it takes 900 years, I said to you. And the first stage is sutras, second stage Vinayas, third stage incompleted life story of the Buddha, fourth stage complete life story of the Buddha but slightly less complete, and then complete life story of the Buddha around the 5th century AD. So the Buddha passed away around 400 before Common Era. So altogether, it takes almost 900 years. So making life story of the Buddha is making pearl necklace. In order to make a pearl necklace, we have every part, making total circle. But it was missing when the Buddha passed away, because Buddha never talked about his life as a kind of a narrative to his disciple. He just mentioned some of the story, one by one, as a kind of explanation. So in the sutta, we have a story about his enlightenment, story about his first teaching, his story about asceticism, and the last 3 months of the Buddha that appear in this area. And then the Vinayas, we have some of the Vinayas, for example, Mahisha Shaka Vinaya, talk about the birth until the conversion of Sariputta and Moggallana. But the Pali version talk about enlightenment toward the conversion of Sariputta and Moggallana. So early establishment of Buddhist Sangha appear in the Vinaya. And the third stage, before and after Common Era, we have Lalita Vistara, done by Sarvastivada in northwestern India, and the Mahabhastu, done by one of the sub-branch of Mahasangika in the central part of India. They usually talk about, life story of the Buddha from birth until the visit of Kapilavastu, the hometown of the Buddha. So it's a kind of a life story, but not complete. So complete life story of the Buddha, I have to say, done by a brilliant Indian minister as well as a scholar and a Buddhist called Ashvaghosha. And he wrote a perfect Sanskrit style, a poem on the life story of the Buddha that was called the Buddha Charita. So that's one of the best life story of the Buddha and the perfect life story. But almost perfect, not yet. It's not complete, because during that time we didn't know what happened to the Buddha's mission days after the enlightenment. Buddha is 40 or 45 years in the mission, and we didn't know that. So that was actually made up during around the 5th century AD in Sri Lanka. It was starting to appear in Nidana Katha, the introduction of Jatakas, and some commentary of the Buddha Vamsha by Buddhadatta. We can get, complete idea of what happened to the life story of the Buddha after the enlightenment until he passed away. So these are the basic idea appear into life story of the Buddha. So you should remember during the time, almost 900 years, life story of the Buddha established everything Buddhists want entering into life story of the Buddha, and the life story of the Buddha become one of the perfect introduction of the Buddhist of the people getting into the Buddhism. So this is not just a story. This is a complete Buddhist introduction, I have to say. So details of life story of the Buddha I mentioned. I show you the photo, which you should remember, or you can check my YouTube channel where I talk about that. And then I was talking about Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice, realizing there is no more desire and attachment left in our body. There are 3 ways I mentioned. That's usually I follow the outcome of the study of Tilman Petter, a brilliant Dutch Buddhist scholar. 3 possible ways. I use the way of asceticism, way of wisdom, way of meditation. And you remember 9 successive meditation in early Buddhism. Here 1, 2, 3, 4. We step by step reduce our mental activities. 4, 5, 6, 7 very 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th very very peculiar. And 9th called the Nirodha Samapatti. And Nirodha Samapatti, it means no more activity in our mind. No more mental activities. So no more action is just like a Jain ascetic tradition. So I call it as a this one as a way of asceticism. But one thing we should remember is that the Buddha become enlightened. The Buddha become finally achieving nirvana, not in the 9th stage in the Nirodha Samapatti, but in the 4th stage of his practice. So 5th and 6th Jain meditation, 7 and 8 Buddha learned from his former teacher Allarak Lama and Uttakarama Buddha, and 9th Jain meditation. So even though this kind of 9 successive meditation become very popular in early Buddhism, but it cannot be the original Buddhist one. And the second way, I call it as a way of wisdom. So the wisdom we need, we usually call it as a triple mark of the Buddhism: anicca, dukkha, anatta. So anicca, dukkha, anatta in this context means anicca, nothing lasts forever. Dukkha, so it will give us unsatisfactoriness and suffering. So anatta, so in the world there is nothing we can say it belongs to me. So that's the anicca, dukkha, anatta. So what we should do is penetrating. We should have a penetrating insight every moment of our thought with the triple knowledge of anicca, dukkha, anatta. And then we step by step lose our interest in the object outside, or object appear inside, and then we no longer have that kind of interest. We are free from our desire and suffering. So that's the main idea of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So that's the knowledge working for removing our desire and attachment. But knowledge itself, if we are not calm down, it's useless. So we have a nice story about Musila and Narada, where they talk about whether they become an Arhan or not. And Mushila, with the perfect knowledge, said, I'm Arhan. I have no more attachment and desire. But Narada said, Mushila said, but Narada said, I'm not not the Arhan, because I got the knowledge, but I have no means to remove all my attachment and desire. So he said, I'm not. So knowledge itself cannot actually remove or solve all our problems. So what we should do calming down our mind. That was called the samatha in early Buddhism. So that's nicely explained in 4 meditation: first meditation, second meditation, third meditation, and fourth meditation. First meditation, Buddha had a nice experience when he was in the plowing festival when he was very young. And in the first meditation, we have a reasoning and discursive thought and the feeling of joy and happiness. And then second meditation, we got concentration on just the one mental object. That was called the Samadhi. When we achieve it, all our discursive thought and reasoning disappear, and there is only joy and happiness born of samadhi or concentration. And then joy starting to disappear. And then third stage of meditation, we only have bodily comfort, happiness. And then bodily happiness also disappear. Then we achieve the fourth stage of meditation, where we have upekkha, equanimity. So this equanimity in early Buddhist text usually compared with the lake, where there is no more wave because no more wind. So we look at the world through the mirror called our mind. We can't see the world directly. We see the world reflected on the mirror of our mind. In order to make our knowledge working, we should make our mirror perfectly still, perfectly calm down. In that calm down stage, we should have a Four Noble Truths. This is way of wisdom. We need the Four Noble Truths. So Four Noble Truths: suffering, origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, the way leading to cessation of suffering. That's the simplest. But what you should do, you should have a knowledge of the first truth: suffering or unsatisfactoriness everywhere. In the second stage, you should remove the origin or the cause of suffering. That's the desire, attachment inside of you. And the third stage, through the removing of your desire and attachment, you can be free from all the suffering. That's the third stage. And the fourth stage, you achieve it. So this kind of process in the early canon was called the 3 turning and 12 aspect. 삼전 12행상 in Korean. Chinese Tiantai tradition usually said samatha and vipassana should working together. So calming down all your mind and the working of knowledge should come together. It's like going up the staircase. You should have one step up. That's the samatha, or settling down your mind. And going up there was insight. Here, in this case, insight of a Four Noble Truths. So removing your desire, and then you will be free. So if you remove everything there, you will be liberated. So all of stages occur just once. It's called the southern tradition, called the Dongguk. So many Zen monks following that. Everything occur step by step. In the humorous case, you should do it. That's a gradual. In Korean, 점수. Usually many scholar monks follow that path, I have to say. So that's the Buddhist practice I was talking about. And lastly, I was talking about establishment of a Buddhist Sangha. Establishment of Buddhist Sangha. You remember? After the enlightenment, Buddha spent 7 weeks in Uruvela area. First week under the Bodhi tree, enjoying the ultimate bliss of liberation. Second week, say thanks to the Bodhi tree. Third week, Buddha going up to the heaven, show I'm the enlightened one. Fourth week, most heavenly beings built a jeweled chamber for the Buddha, and the Buddha preparing to talk about Abhidhamma. So this stage, Abhidhamma become the holy book, the most important book in Southern Buddhism. Third stage, second stage, when the Buddha say thanks to the Buddha, which means the Bodhi tree become important relic of Buddhism. So every Buddhist temple in Southeast Asia, there is a Bodhi tree. And fifth week, 3 girls seducing the Buddha, each representing raga, dosa, moha, passion, hatred, and delusion. Buddhists should remove. The Buddha undisturbed, and he overcome that final, seduction. And then 6th week, Nagaraja, Mucharinda is a big water snake protecting the Buddha. And the 7th week, Tapusha and Balika, 2 merchants appear in front of the Buddha, offering the food. Then the Buddha, for the first time, accept a pata or bowl, through which a monk can carry the bowl, and they can actually accept something in possession of that. So that's the starting point of pata. And the 2 merchants, when they go back, they need a souvenir. Then the Buddha gave them their Buddha's hair. So this hair become the part of the Shedagon Pagoda according to Southern Buddhist tradition in Burma. According to Northwestern tradition, one of the temple in Hada. And according to Sinhala tradition, it goes back to the Sri Lanka and so on. So that's the first Buddha's stupa, in the human world. So the first stupa in the heaven, with the help of Indra, God Indra, when the Buddha, perform going forth, when he cut the hair, all the hair collected by Indra and go to the heaven and build a heavenly stupa called the Chulamani stupa. And the second Buddhist stupa, Buddha's stupa, built in the underworld when the Buddha threw away the gold plate given by Sujata when he ate the food. The Nagaraja in the river took it, going down there, and built Buddhist stupa there, down there. So the 7th week is very important. The first Buddhist stupa built in human world because of that. After that, the Buddha starting to have a mission, and he met some of the Ajivika monk, and he gave first the sermon. And we have a story of Yasa, and the Buddhism become bigger and bigger, and we have a nice mission statement of the Buddha. Charita bhikkhave charikam bahujana hitaya bahujana sukhaya loka anukampaya ataya hitaya sukhaya dewa manusam. O monk, for the sake of God and human beings, for their happiness, for their welfare, for yourself, through the compassionate mind of the world, you should perform, you should go around the world for the benefit of all living creatures, for the benefit of all, for the happiness of all living creatures. So Bahujana, many living creatures, Hitaya, welfare, many living creatures, Sukhaya, happiness. So Buddhism is not for oneself. Buddhism is for everyone, I have to say. Ma ekena dwe agamita. Not go by two. You should go alone to everywhere. We are very hurry. We should do something for every person. Here we mentioned here. And then Buddha met the Kashyapa brothers, almost 1,000 ascetic group entering into the Buddhism. They all become part of the Buddhist, become the Buddhist, and then Buddhism become bigger and bigger. The king of Magadha area, Bimbisara, wandered around, and people said to him that Buddha is such a kind of person. Iti piso bhagawa arahan sammasambuddho bijacarana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manusanam buddho bhagawa. And it become 10 titles of the Buddha. So if I translate this, so this is the voice of people to the king. He is a noble because he is a respectable one, arahan. He is a fully, perfectly awakened one. He is someone possessed with the knowledge and good behavior. He is the one who will disappear well from the endless rivers. He is equipped with the knowledge of the world. He is a highest one. He is a good caravan leader, leading all the people into nirvana or awakening. Or he is a teacher among the human beings and the God. He is enlightened one. He is a blessed one. So Bimbisara met the Buddha, and he accepted the Buddha as his teacher, and he donate his land to the Buddhism, and it become Beluwana, Jungnim Jangsa, or Buddhist, bamboo tree monastery. So one of the first Buddhist Bihara established there. So at this point, we have a Sangha, the Buddha and all the disciples, and we have a lay support. For example, Yasa family, they are merchant class in the city, become the supporter of Buddhism. So many sons of a merchant class become Buddhist monk. They become the leader, and the merchant class become good supporter of Buddhism. So Buddhism, I have to say, the religion of a merchant class. And then here we have the royal support as well, so Buddhism can get the land. And then Buddha need 2 disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. And Sariputta and Moggallana, entering into Buddhism, they convert from Sanjaya idea to the Buddhism, and they become 2 arch-disciples of the Buddha. So here, establishment of Buddhist Sangha firmly completed, and the Buddhism become a major religion in the Magadha area. So I just have a quick summary of the lecture I've given during the 6 or 7 weeks. So I hope you prepare your exam well, and I will see you at the 9th week. Thank you very much.